You think you understand how your own mind works. You make choices. You weigh options. You decide. Fine. But why do you keep making the same mistakes? Why do smart people fall for obvious errors? What stops careful thinking from actually protecting you? Most people don't ask. They say things like bias or human nature. They repeat words. But that's not an answer. When you really ask why, you find something that changes how you see thinking itself. Not as reasoning, but as a system with built-in shortcuts it can't escape. Let me show you. Start with something simple. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? You already heard an answer in your head. You didn't compute it. It just appeared. 10 cents. It feels clean. It fits the numbers. It sounds right. And the reason it sounds right is also simple. Your mind does a fast subtraction. $1 more sounds like take $1 away. So you take $1.10 and subtract $1. You get $0.10. Done. Closure. But that closure is an illusion. If the ball were 10 cents, the bat would be $1.10. That's $1.20 total, not $1.10. The correct answer is 5 cents. Now notice what just happened. The voice in your head didn't say, let's reason carefully. It didn't lay out equations. It didn't ask permission. It produced a finished conclusion, with confidence, with a sense of closure. And only after that, if you bothered, you checked. That order matters. Because it means the thing you experience as thinking is often the last step, not the first. The conclusion arrives. Then the voice explains it. A lot of people hear this and think, sure, but I can always fix it if I try hard enough. Sometimes you can, but notice the default. The mistake happens before effort even enters the scene. But wait, if the voice produces answers automatically, what is the you that feels like it's deciding? Because it still feels like you chose. It still feels like you reasoned. It still feels like you were in control. So, here's the real question. What is the voice in your head actually for? Most people assume it's the thinker, the captain, the part that steers. But that assumption doesn't match what you just observed. You didn't steer 10 cents into your mind. It arrived. So that's the surface. Now here's the key. This isn't a rare glitch. It's the default mode, and you can catch it with an even simpler trap. Read this sentence once, quickly. How many animals of each kind did Moses take on the ark? Before you think too hard, an answer appears. 2. And now if you slow down, you notice what you just did. Moses didn't take animals on an ark. Noah did. Nothing about your intelligence caused that mistake. You didn't choose it. The system pattern completed the story before you inspected it. You saw ark. You saw a familiar structure, and the mind filled in the rest. You didn't decide to miss the name. The system edited reality before you saw it. That's what the voice is sitting on top of. A stream of automatic completions. So, let's build the model from the ground up. First claim, you don't select thoughts. You inherit outputs. Now here's the next question. If thoughts arrive as outputs, why do they feel like yours? Because the voice doesn't just report, it stabilizes. It turns raw outputs into a coherent world you can navigate. The voice is not the driver, it's the dashboard. And dashboards have warning lights. They light up fast, sometimes too fast. So what makes the dashboard flash true so easily? So let's trace it. Where do thoughts come from before you think them? Watch what your mind does here. I say bread. You don't just hear a word, a cloud of associations wakes up. Butter, toaster, breakfast, smell, warmth, 1,000 linked fragments. Then I say, doctor. Another cloud wakes up. Hospital, authority, relief, risk, needles, paperwork. You didn't assemble that network deliberately. It activated, automatically, like an autofocus snapping onto a face. Your mind is always doing this, completing patterns, predicting what's next, guessing meaning from partial data, a headline, a facial expression, a number, a pause in a conversation. Fragments go in, a guess comes out, and the guess becomes your experience of what's obvious. This is why you can read a sentence with missing letters and barely notice. Why autocorrect can replace a word and you still keep reading. Why you can walk into a room and feel the mood without knowing a single concrete fact that proves it. The system is built to go from sparse cues to a usable story. So the voice in your head isn't the source of thought. It's the interface that receives these outputs and turns them into language. A label, a story you can repeat. But wait, if it's an interface, why does it feel like certainty? Because the system isn't built to be correct. It's built to be fast enough to act. A mind that waits for perfect certainty doesn't move. A mind that doesn't move doesn't survive. So the system makes a trade. Speed over accuracy, coherence over truth, a usable story over a complete model. And once it has a story, it stops searching. That stopping feels like confidence. Confidence is not proof. Confidence is the sensation the system generates when it closes the file. So what does that imply? It implies that the voice can sound most certain precisely when it has done the least work. Not because it's malicious, because closing the file is the whole point. Now here's the strange part. Ease is the system's favorite shortcut. Because ease feels like evidence. Why does an easy thought feel like a correct thought? Because fluency, the smoothness of processing, gets misread as truth. If something comes to mind quickly, it feels familiar. If it feels familiar, it feels safe. If it feels safe, it feels true. That chain is not logic. It's a proxy. You can watch it happen when someone asks you a question you don't actually know. How many countries are in Africa? What's the inflation rate right now? How long does it take for a message to cross the ocean? You don't know. But the voice hates I don't know. I don't know is friction. It's a whole incoherence. So the system reaches for what's available. A number that sounds plausible. A memory that resembles the topic. A headline you half remember. A confident person you once heard say something related. Then the voice reports the output with the tone of knowledge, not because you checked, because it came easily. This is why a familiar name can feel safer than an unfamiliar one. Why a slogan can feel like an argument. Why something that sounds like it's always been true can bypass scrutiny. The system uses fluency as a shortcut for reliability. And once fluency is in the driver's seat, you get a very specific illusion. The illusion that recognition is understanding. This is why repetition matters. Hear a claim once, it's just information. Hear it again, it becomes familiar. Hear it 5 times, it starts to feel like background reality. The system registers the ease of recognition. The voice misreads that ease as I've always known this. This is also why simple explanations win. A messy world becomes a clean story. The clean story is easy to hold, so it feels real. So what does that imply? It implies that truth and fluency get tangled together inside the dashboard. Smooth can feel true even when it's wrong. Now we climb one rung higher. Because fluency doesn't just create belief. It creates a special kind of blindness. Here's the key. The system builds conclusions out of what's in front of it, and it barely registers what's missing. You can think of it like a spotlight. Your attention is narrow on purpose. At any moment, you can hold only a handful of items in mind, something like 4, give or take. So the system compresses aggressively. Whatever the spotlight hits becomes the situation. Whatever the spotlight misses doesn't feel like missing information. It feels like it never existed. So you get a weird result. You can have a strong conclusion with a thin evidence base, and it still feels complete. If I show you 3 facts about a person, your mind finishes the person. If I show you a vivid example of something, your mind updates the whole category. If I give you a story, your mind treats it like a sample. And the absence of information doesn't slow you down. It just disappears. Here's a way to see how extreme that is. Imagine I tell you a story about a friend who invested in a company and got rich. It's vivid. There's a timeline. There are details. You can picture it. Now, ask what you actually learned. Not the feeling, the information. You learned one outcome, one path, one example. You learned nothing about how many people invested and lost. Nothing about the base rate of companies that fail. Nothing about the selection filter that decides which stories get told. But the system doesn't treat missing denominator as a warning. It treats the vivid example as data. The spotlight hits the story, and the story becomes the category. That's why a single dramatic event can reshape your sense of the whole world. A rare crash can make flying feel unsafe. A sensational crime can make a city feel like it's collapsing. A headline about one spectacular fraud can make an entire industry feel corrupt. It's not that the mind can't understand statistics. It's that the default system doesn't start with statistics. It starts with what it can picture. And because what's missing doesn't feel missing, the picture feels complete. The voice then speaks with the confidence of completeness. It feels like deep knowledge when it's mostly whatever information happened to be in the spotlight. This is why 2 people can look at the same situation with different pieces of information and both feel obvious certainty. They aren't lying. They're each running coherence on partial inputs. Consider how quickly you form a view of a stranger. You hear them speak for 30 seconds. You notice confidence or hesitation. You hear a few polished phrases. And a whole identity snaps into place. Competent, incompetent, trustworthy, untrustworthy. But what did you actually observe? A tiny slice, a performance under one set of conditions, a handful of cues. Everything else, the history, the edge cases, the failure modes, the context, is missing. Yet, the dashboard shows a full portrait anyway. Because the system doesn't weight evidence. It weights what shows up. And once the portrait feels coherent, the system relaxes. It stops searching for disconfirming information. Not because it's stubborn, but because its job is to close the file. This is the quiet engine behind premature certainty. Not I am certain because I have checked everything. I am certain because what I have is enough to form a story. Now you can see the connection. Fluency makes the story feel true. Missing information fails to register as missing. So the story feels complete. And once a story feels complete, the voice treats it like reality. Now we're ready for the next rung. Because when the question is hard, the system doesn't just build a story from what's there. It does something more aggressive. It swaps the question, why do smart people make dumb mistakes? The usual answer is laziness or carelessness. or they didn't think hard enough. But that's just blame wearing a lab coat. It doesn't explain the mechanism. Here's the mechanism. When a question is hard, the system quietly replaces it with an easier question. Then it answers the easier one. Then the voice reports that answer as if it answered the original. No warning, no pop-up, just a substitution. Let me make this concrete. Imagine you're asked, which of these two policies will reduce crime more? That's a hard question. You'd need base rates. You'd need long-term data. You'd need to separate correlation from cause. You'd need to handle trade-offs. Your system doesn't want all that. So it substitutes something easier. Which one sounds fair? Which one sounds like what good people support? Which one matches what I already believe? Which one makes a cleaner story in my head? Those are easy. They're fluent. They produce a feeling quickly. Now notice what happens next. You hear yourself say policy A is better, and it feels like you answered the crime question. But you didn't. You answered a question about taste, identity, or familiarity. Then the voice labeled it as analysis. That's the swap. Hard question, what is true? Easy question, what feels right? And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You ask, is this person competent? Hard question. Competence is multidimensional. You'd need data across time. So the system substitutes, do they sound confident? Do I like them? Can I recall one impressive thing? You ask. How risky is this decision? Hard question. So the system substitutes, how scary does it feel? How vivid is the downside? Can I picture something going wrong? You ask, how happy am I with my life? Hard question. So the system substitutes, how do I feel right now? And the voice reports the substituted answer in the language of the original question. So what does that imply? It implies you don't just get answers. You get answers to different questions than the ones you asked. Now, there's one more twist. If answers arrive automatically, and sometimes to swapped questions, why do you feel like the author? Because the voice isn't only a reporter, it's a narrator. It takes whatever the system outputs and stitches it into a story about me. A story with reasons, a story with continuity, a story that makes the world feel stable. Watch the timeline. Often the order is a judgment appears, an action follows, an explanation arrives. Then the explanation carries a subtle illusion. It feels like it caused the action. But very often it didn't. It's after the fact, narrative glue. Think about how quickly you can justify something you just did. You bought something, and reasons appear. You avoided something, and reasons appear. You dismissed an idea, and reasons appear. Reasons arrive on demand because coherence is the system's priority. A coherent self feels stable. An incoherent self feels like danger. So the voice stabilizes. It smooths contradictions. It turns impulses into principles. It turns a moment into a meaning. And it does something even more important. It takes credit, not in a dramatic way, in a structural way. And the way it takes credit is subtle. It doesn't say, I invented this. It says, of course. You can feel it when you remember. You recall a past decision, and it feels like it was always pointing to the outcome. The voice cleans up the mess. It removes the uncertainty that was present at the time. It turns a rough sequence of impulses, hesitations, and luck into a straight line. That's not a moral failing. It's a function. A self that constantly feels random and accidental would be impossible to steer, because nothing would feel learnable. So the voice edits the past into a story with reasons, because reasons make the future feel manageable. Then it presents the story as authorship. I decided, I chose, I knew, even when the underlying process was automatic. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine a press office. Decisions are made in a room you don't see. Constraints, pressures, timing, limited information. Then a spokesperson steps out and gives a clean explanation. That explanation is not the decision. It's the narrative that makes the decision legible. That's what the voice does. The voice in your head is not your commander. It's your press secretary. Now, at this point, you might think this is just a neat description, a metaphor, a way to talk. But the point is that it predicts failures, specific failures, in specific systems, over and over. So let's test it with proof pressure. First, a controlled test. Then the same failure out in the world. First, the controlled one. Take an arbitrary number, not evidence, not information, just a number placed into the mind, 2000. Then ask for an estimate of something unrelated, a quantity you don't know precisely. What's strange is not that people are influenced. What's strange is how invisible the influence feels. A number appears first, it becomes available. Availability feels relevant. So the estimate moves toward it. Then the voice provides reasons as if it came from knowledge. It doesn't say, a random number pulled me. It says, this seems right. And if you listen carefully, you can hear the press secretary doing its job. It doesn't protect accuracy, it protects coherence. So what does that imply? It implies the voice can justify outcomes that were shaped before justification even began. Now, watch the same machinery fail in two real systems, predictably. People think forecasting works like information processing. More inputs, better outputs. Cleaner certainty. Now put this machine in the one place it should fail. The future. The future is not fluent. Distributions are not fluent. Uncertainty is not fluent. Stories are fluent. And because stories are fluent, they create a dangerous signal. They feel like mastery. They feel like you've seen the pattern. Think about the kind of prediction people love. Not, there's a 30% chance of X. They want, here's what will happen. One track, one outcome, one clean arc. That preference doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from the machinery. A distribution is hard to narrate. A story is easy to repeat. So the voice favors the thing it can say cleanly. And notice the quiet substitution. The hard question is, what will happen across many possible futures? The easy question is, which story feels like the world I recognize? So forecasters and audiences gravitate toward narratives. A simple chain of causes, a turning point, a single dominant factor, a storyline you can repeat in one sentence. It feels like understanding. And once it feels like understanding, the dashboard lights up. You get the sensation of, I see it, the file closes, but wait, feeling like understanding is not the same as being able to predict. Because the story is built out of what shows up, not out of what's missing, not out of the base rate of surprises, not out of all the alternate futures that were just as plausible yesterday. And once the story clicks, the system relaxes. It stops searching, the dashboard flashes certain, then reality happens. Sometimes it matches, often it doesn't, and even when it matches, it can be for reasons the story never contained. Now watch the signature move of the press secretary. When the prediction fails, the voice doesn't say, "My model was too narrow." It says, "No one could have predicted this." Or a special factor intervened, or the timing was unusual. It rebuilds coherence after the fact. The outcome becomes inevitable in retrospect. The story edits itself to fit what happened. And that retrofitted story feels like insight. That is why people can be wrong repeatedly and still feel like good reasoners. The voice is excellent at post hoc coherence. And the failure mode is predictable. Narrative fluency beats probabilistic reality. Now take a system that feels even more rational. Hiring. An interview feels like a test of competence, a rational process, a way to detect ability. But the interview is also a perfect environment for substitution. The real question is hard. How will this person perform across months, under pressure, across contexts? Because think about the sampling problem. A typical interview might be 1 hour. A working year is roughly 2,000 hours. 1 hour is about 0.05% of that. You're trying to predict a year from a few minutes of cues. So the system does what it always does when data is thin. It fills the gaps. It turns presentation into essence. It turns fluency into ability. It turns confidence into competence. That's almost impossible to answer from a short conversation. So the system protects itself. It turns the hard question into something it can answer right now. It substitutes. Do they seem confident? Do they speak smoothly? Do they resemble the people I already trust? Do they give me a coherent impression? Those are easy. Those are fluent. Those produce a feeling quickly. Then the voice reports the feeling as if it were evidence. They're strong, they're sharp, they have leadership presence. But wait, presence is not performance. Confidence is not competence. A polished story in a room is not the same as handling messy reality over time. And when hiring goes wrong, notice what happens. People don't usually say, "We substituted the wrong question." They say, "We were misled," or "they changed," or "the role shifted." Again, the press secretary protects coherence, because admitting we never had the information needed feels like admitting the dashboard was guessing. And the system hates that sensation. So the failure mode is predictable. Interviews don't reveal competence. They reveal what your mind treats as competence. Now let's bring it together. People think failure means they didn't try hard enough. But often the trying layer never touched the decision layer. The judgment happened upstream, automatically, before effort entered the scene. That's why think harder isn't a complete description of what's missing. Because the mistake is often not a lack of thinking. It's the wrong machine running at the wrong time. So here is the reframe, stated cleanly. The voice in your head isn't a philosopher searching for truth. It's an interface that makes fast outputs feel like reason. It makes the world feel stable. It makes the self feel stable. It makes action possible without paralysis. And that's why it's persuasive. Because it's not trying to deceive you, it's trying to keep a coherent model running in real time. But coherence is not accuracy. A story can be smooth and still be wrong. A conclusion can be confident and still be unearned. So, when you hear the voice explaining what you chose, remember this. Explanation is not origin. And the deepest part is this. You can't step outside the system and fully supervise it. Because the supervision is produced by the same machinery. The voice can comment on the voice, but commentary is not control. It's just more narration. So we end where we began. You think you're reasoning, but you're running a system that trades accuracy for speed. You don't choose, you default. You don't analyze, you pattern match. You don't decide, you shortcut. Thinking isn't a tool you control. It's a system that controls what you notice. Not comfort, truth. And the next mechanism is already waiting. Because the system treats threats to coherence as threats to reality. That's why disagreement can feel so high stakes, even when the topic is abstract. A claim isn't just information. Once the voice has built a coherent model around it, the claim becomes a support beam. Pull it out, and the structure wobbles. So the system reacts the way any stability-seeking system reacts. It doesn't start by asking, could I be wrong? It starts by restoring coherence. It searches for counter-arguments, not because counter-arguments are always correct, but because they repair the story. You can see this in real time when someone is shown evidence that contradicts what they just said. Often the first response is not analysis, it's defense. A quick explanation, a reframe, a reason the evidence doesn't count. Not because humans are uniquely stubborn, because the voice is doing its job, keeping the world narratable, keeping the self continuous, keeping the file closed. That's the machinery underneath. And it keeps running, even when you insist it isn't.